What is consciousness? Where does it come from? How does it work? It is a little bit of a mystery that there are billions of human beings, all with their own experiences. I can't hear your thoughts. I can't feel your feelings. And there's millions of species, and each species has its own wildly different way of experiencing itself. What is consciousness? How did it all come about? My latest film tries to answer these great mysteries, some of the grandest mysteries that we can ask. And if you haven't watched the film, the link is in the description. And this is a live session where I'm going to be answering your questions. We've got 74 people tuning in live. So beautiful to have your presence. And yeah, let's get into some of this. So we've got a question from Jazz Cool Cat. Very cool name. Why does the universe exist? That's almost an even bigger question than what is consciousness. So let's just kind of contextualize why these questions are important first. So I'm guessing that you are like me, that you love learning, you love wanting to understand who you truly are. And then with that clarity, to live a life of more joy and ease and meaning. And part of being a human being is that we can ask questions. We wonder when we look at a night sky or a sunset or see a child being born or the passing of a loved one. You know, what is life? Like, what are we a part of? How does this all work? And over history, communities have come up with different stories and understandings to give some clarity to those great existential questions. Like, who am I? How does this all work? What is consciousness? Why does the universe exist? So let's go to Jazz Cool Cat's question. Why does the universe exist? That is the biggest question that we can ask. You know, why is there something, not nothing? And maybe just to really clarify that something is magnificent and is full of intelligence and creativity. You know, your creativity, the creativity of all the plants and animals that have survived on our planet for billions of years. So the mystery that there's something, not nothing, and that something is magnificent and intelligent. So I don't have the answer to that. A phrase that I love is to stop asking why and to start saying, wow. Taoist philosophy that I studied in China for 2 out of the last 8 years, their opening text, the opening lines of their foundational philosophical text says, the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. The Tao is their word for the mystery, the universe, cosmos. So the universe that can be described is not the eternal Tao. It's not the eternal universe. If we try and describe it in words, we necessarily limit it. So why does the universe exist? You know, it's a reasonable question, but any answer that we give to that will necessarily be limited. So sometimes we need to come out of the thinking mind and to come into the present moment and say, wow, wow to this life. And that includes, you know, all of the pain and the loss and the gain and death and life and anxiety and depression, all of it. But when we come into a deeper relationship with the miraculousness and the mysteriousness of life, then we find a bit more ease and a bit more spaciousness to navigate. Yeah, the changes of life and the waves of life. A question from Guess. What have you observed in your journey in Scotland alone? So I have spent quite a lot of my life alone in mountains, and I love it. There's also parts of me that I'm still single at the age of 30 and, oh, George, you haven't found a life partner yet. Well, it's because I've been living in a cabin by myself and not talking to anyone. But there is something that is powerful. It's firstly being in nature. And I'm sure you know this as well, is that when you take the time to go out and to be in silence amongst the trees, listening to the birds, there's a sense of belonging that can come from that. A sense of remembering. Member is the body. To remember is to re-embody. So to remember our belonging to this planet, that we are an aspect of it. We're not alien visitors here, separate from it all. Instead, we are like a wave on the cosmic ocean, distinct, unique, but very much connected. When we walk in nature, we begin to reconnect with our nature. By going out, we come within. Now, you can do this with friends and invite silence and presence together in nature. It's a very beautiful thing to share in community. And part of this journey of waking up to who we truly are is to also walk that path alone. Because we're all unique and we can't just rely on other people's words to say, this is who you are, this is how you should live your life, because we're all unique. And just because we're unique doesn't mean we make it all up. There's ancient wisdom that can support us to find clarity. But nobody can walk that path to clarity for you. You've got to find it for yourself. So often that will involve, if you eventually heed the call, is to take time to be in nature by yourself. And for me, that has been very powerful. It's been some of my deepest insights, is to just simply be quiet in nature and see what that can teach me. So Hussein asks, when I had my awakening, I understood that consciousness is one and indivisible, and they were all part of that one same consciousness, everything alive within the universe. So the film explores, right? So we've already explored, we're conscious and we're having experiences, thoughts, feelings, sensations, and there's millions of species that are also having experiences. Not thinking with words, but emotions, and they are creative. Trees we find in the film, they scare off giraffes with their farts. They've worked out how to scare off giraffes by releasing a gas. So that's intelligent. They are creatively solving problems. And the question of the film is, okay, well, if we're seeing this intelligence everywhere, well, does that mean trees are conscious, plants are conscious? What is our relationship to the universe? How does our experience relate to the universe? Is the universe experiencing? Is it alive? Is it conscious? So these are deep mysteries, and we explore one way of understanding that, which dominates our world, materialism, which dominates science and technology and economics and politics. Materialism says that consciousness, experience evolved through the process of evolution. Unconscious matter, through the process of evolution, became so complex that the sensory stimuli that an organism was experiencing came together through nervous systems and brains, and then an integrated sense of self was created. Conscious experience emerged. But that then raises the question of the hard problem of consciousness, which is, well, how does unconscious matter create conscious experience? And the problem with consciousness is either you have it or you don't. You can't say life was kind of conscious early in evolution and then became more conscious. It's like a light switch. Either you have it or you don't. So the challenges of the materialist worldview, and it is important to note that it is a religion, and I mean that in a generous sense, is that there are stories that the atheistic materialist worldview tell about the world, and we are storytelling creatures, as it says in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Planet Earth, the home of the storytelling apes. We need stories, and they're important, but we also need to acknowledge when we are telling stories. And one of the shadows of atheistic materialism is the claim that it is purely rational, purely scientific. Unconscious matter created conscious organisms. That's it. The universe is unconscious, and consciousness emerged sometime in history. But that is an unproven claim, right? That's an unproven claim. And can we really know that matter is unconscious? We can't prove that. So then that becomes a belief, a story that worldview, that atheistic materialism tells about how the universe works. And often the people that hold these views don't acknowledge that they are creating a story. And again, stories are essential, but the acknowledgement of the story is also essential to develop wisdom. So then, if that leap from unconscious matter to consciousness is unexplained, there's also other data points that we need to bring in, which is that there's just a diversity and abundance of creativity and experience on our planet flowing through all of the animals. And then certainly the plants are intelligent, but if they're not conscious, then where did consciousness come from? So coming back to the point that Hussein raised, is that he had an experience that we are all one and indivisible and that we're all part of the same consciousness. Is that if we see conscious life throughout the universe, and since we are conscious, how do we explain it? Maybe actually consciousness is an inseparable part of the cosmos. That makes sense to me, and I hold the conclusion of the film lightly, so not just to create a new dogma of certainty, but that does explain a lot more. The reality of the intelligence and experience that is flowing through nature. So another question then is about vegetarianism and veganism. So yeah, I've been veggie/vegan for most of my life, and as I learn more about consciousness, I can't help but connect with the sentience of the animal that I am consuming. And I think an important distinction in understanding the morality of interacting with animals is a distinction between suffering and killing. Because we see in nature that death and life, they're in endless cycles, and it is an essential part of the interconnected web that some animals eat others in order to survive and live. And that we can't say just as a straight fact that killing is wrong, because if there wasn't killing in nature, we wouldn't be here. But then we, as beings that can choose, we can choose how we eat, as we are omnivores, and we don't have to necessarily follow one particular diet. And we who are raising our consciousness and wanting to hopefully embody compassionate living and to bring more compassion and love and balance to our planet, then the question comes, well, how do I want to choose how I eat? And for me, as I connect with the sentience of a cow who is forcibly impregnated so that then we can take her milk, and she's pregnant, and then we take the baby away 3 days after they're born. That's a big trauma and a sense of grief for that mother. So there's a lot of suffering there. And then that cow is milked for however long until they stop producing the milk, and then they're artificially impregnated again, going through the whole stress of childbirth. You'll know people from your own life, like how challenging childbirth can be, and that stress that cow goes through. And yet the consequence for us is, we have cheese and milk just in the supermarket, and we don't connect with actually the suffering that has happened in order to create those products that we consume. And if killing isn't necessarily bad in itself, surely we can agree factory farms, which is the vast majority of how meat is produced in our modern world, is that a pig, which is just as intelligent as a dog. If you think about your fluffy tail wagging dog that loves cuddles and loves to lie with you on the sofa and has this vibrant, beautiful personality, pigs have that same capacity. And yet we trap these pigs in cages where they can barely move, and then fatten them up and then kill them for bacon. And then in the supermarket, we just see the outcome of that. So you're on your own journey, and you make your own decisions. But as I connect with the suffering that is involved with the animal industries, and as I learn more about the sentience and the experience and the richness of the inner worlds of these animals, then it makes me want to try and reduce the suffering that I inflict from my food and my diet. Another question is then plants. We just talked about consciousness being everywhere. Plants are living beings. I sense that they are conscious, certainly intelligent. Well, what about then killing your lettuce? Then this brings us back to the difference between killing and suffering, is that plants don't have nervous systems and don't have pain receptors. They do let out sounds when they're cut, and they're organisms that want to live and will try and live. So yeah, there is a being that's being killed there, but the level of suffering is a lot less. And so that, for me, makes the difference. A beautiful question is, was the Buddha right about the self and consciousness? So in the film, we talk about the Buddha's insight, where he didn't want to rely on the teachings of his day. He wanted to understand the nature of consciousness through his own experience, much like I imagine you do. And what the Buddha found through his own experience is that consciousness is not just thinking with thoughts, but instead a whole field of awareness, thoughts and feelings and sensations arising and passing. And this gives us really the key to liberation. If you've been on a meditation journey or are considering starting it, this is such a powerful, powerful insight that I'm not just this story of, George being messed up in all these various ways. My underminer saying, hey, George, still single, not many friends, financially insecure, you're pathetic, you are flawed goods. When I can notice that thought in my field of awareness, knowing that this is just an energy arising and passing in consciousness, then I find freedom. I don't need to attach or identify with those thoughts, and find a sense of natural joy and ease that comes from the present moment. So practically, meditation, which has been discovered all around the world, not just the Buddha, is a practical way of understanding our everyday lived experience. There's the content of consciousness, and then there's the context, which is consciousness itself, the spaciousness within which your experience arises and passes. And if we can live and identify as that spacious, it's like the night sky and the stars are the passing thoughts and emotions. If we can identify as the sky, the space itself, then freedom, resilience, space, and ease are ours. So these are the core teachings of waking up all around the world. So a question of Jai Wei asking about books, and there's a PDF guide which is in the description, which gives some of the core books that I recommend. I love Ian McIlgrist's work. I think his work is very powerful. His book, The Matter with Things, it's like 3,000 pages long. It's a very long book, but very powerful introduction to the science of consciousness and reality. And this main insight that we concluded the film with, that there are no separate things, that everything is energy in constant transformation. So even the atom, we used to think the atom was like a billiard ball. It's like a little Lego brick, and the whole universe was made from these Lego bricks. And then here we are, a human being, but really we're built from these separate little things, little building blocks. But then we find that even the atom itself isn't a separate thing. It's a process of relationship. It has a nucleus in the middle and then electrons orbiting. It's 99% empty space. So then the whole of the cosmos is then shaped by these invisible forces, energy in pattern, and then these self-organizing systems then coalesce in fractals into bigger and bigger complex systems. So the atom being a self-organizing system, not a separate thing, but instead a process of relationship. Then molecules and tissues and organs, and then a whole body. Like this body, 36 trillion cells, all arising and passing. It's not a single cell in me now that was in me when I was born. And yet I'm still George. So I'm not a separate static thing. Instead, I am a process. A galaxy, hundreds of billions of stars. A galaxy isn't a thing. It's just a label we put on a self-organizing system, a pattern of relationship. And so then when we see that there aren't separate things in the universe, then we begin to be able to acknowledge that maybe consciousness isn't a separate thing either. We don't need to separate consciousness from material, hard stuff. It's all energy and constant transformation. And the links are for the PDF is in the main film description, and I will update that soon. And then we could talk about trauma as the Wizard of Sounds is talking about. And that's a cracking name. That we're part of life, billions of years of evolution. And as human beings, no baby is born with the belief that it's not worthy, that I'm not good enough, right? A baby is just this like consciousness coming into being, and we begin to teach it words like ma. Like what? Why is the word mum basically the same in every culture? Like I lived in China, mama is the word for mum. One theory goes is that when the baby's crying, and then an easy consonant, mama. Then, oh, well, mama, okay, their first word, I'm mum, mama. Or then, dada, baba. So then we begin to tell the baby, like, yes, you've labeled me right. I am mama. He is baba. And then we teach children, thousands and thousands of words, and that consciousness begins to learn how to discern and distinguish between all the different objects in the world. And that baby, it doesn't have any stories of not being enough, right? Of being unworthy. And yet through our childhood, there's messaging that we take on at a very early age that then can be some of our core wounding. So for me, I lived in a busy household with two sisters and workaholic parents. And if I was really crazy and did silly faces, or if I achieved, then I would get celebrated and I'd get seen. And for this little 7-year-old George, he just wanted to be seen and wanted to be loved. And so one of my core wounds is that, yeah, if I achieve, then I'm loved. And so that was some messaging that young little George took on in order to get that love that consciousness wants. Consciousness wants to thrive and survive, and as social beings, we want to be loved and belong. And then trauma happens where we don't get those needs met, and then we begin to internalize beliefs about who we are. That then consciousness is trying to work it out. Like, well, if I'm not enough, then at least like I can take the control back, because then I can try and do better and be more. It's much better to say I am broken than my parents are broken. Because if I'm 7 years old and my parents are broken, that's death for me. They are everything. They wake up before me, they go to bed after me, they feed me, they clothe me. If I'm not good enough, that might be painful, yes. But at least that's something I can control. I can try and be better. So that's why children, we take on these beliefs. And so again, like finding that clarity of like how human beings work and consciousness and emotions and hearts, we naturally find compassion. Compassion is the natural consequence of true understanding. Compassion is the natural consequence of true understanding. Oh yeah, like I really get that the reason I've got this wound of not feeling enough is because I just wasn't seen as a young child, and so I tried really hard in order to be seen. Oh yeah, that makes sense. I get that. So the heart, when it truly understands, like our consciousness, when it sees the source of the wound, then we can begin to heal and say, okay, I don't need to be living from this old pattern anymore. We can love the pain, the trauma, the challenge. We have to hold that. And then from that place of loving embrace, then we begin to create new experiences and new energy. Beautiful. So we will take a couple more and then we will be complete. So yeah, the fun one, does consciousness, do brains create consciousness, or does consciousness create the brain? That's one of the key questions of this film. Mary asking, is consciousness an infinite fractal contemplating itself through every being? That seems to me to be the case. That you are a way for the universe to know itself. Because there is no separate you. The neurons that are firing in your brain when you say, I am separate from the universe, or I don't belong here. Those neurons, the atoms of those neurons, were forged in the furnace of a star billions of years ago. And over the process of evolution, maybe the fundamental consciousness that makes us up comes into more and more complex forms. And eventually nervous systems and brains form. And then that subconsciousness that flows through the universe has become so complex that those neurons, those atoms that were made in the furnaces of stars billions of years ago, begin to create thoughts. And those thoughts of saying, I'm not enough, and I'm separate, I don't belong, I'm an alien. So there is no separate ego, there's no separate you. You are a way for the universe to know itself. And the irony of the journey of waking up is that we already belong, and yet we need to walk the path in order to remember. As I said earlier, remember members the body to remember to re-embody. Jason asking a big question. Have you had thoughts on how the universe can be endless? It has to be endless due to the issue if there was an endpoint or a wall, then what is on the other side of that wall? Yeah, so was there a starting point to the universe? In our current understanding, the story we tell with science is, there's the Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago. And we can see that because the stars far away, the whole universe is expanding. And as the light from faraway stars comes to us, it's slightly redshifted. It's like the Doppler effect. When an ambulance goes past you, it goes nino, 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 because now it's moving away from you. And so the wavelength has stretched, it's redshifted. And so we can see the further away a star is, the more redshifted it is, because it's accelerating further away from us, which means that the very universe is expanding and everything within it. And even to the extent that on the far edges of the universe, the light that is coming from the stars there will never reach us, because the whole universe is expanding eventually at a rate quicker than the light can get from that far end of the universe to here. So seeing this, scientists and physicists, they calculated, well, if we run the tape back of all this expansion, everything came from one point, the Big Bang. They calculate 13.8 billion years ago, a singularity that created all that we know. Then that obviously asks the deep question, well, what was before the Big Bang? And is the universe just going to go out forever, or is it going to contract again? And these are answers that really is where philosophy comes in, or spirituality. It's that we can't answer those questions. And so what I love about Taoist philosophy is it also doesn't invite certainty. It says we don't know. Some theist religions take this as evidence of God. It's like, well, if we live in a mechanistic universe, there has to be the initial cause that got everything going. So like 13.8 billion years, everything moves according to the forces of nature, but there had to be something to get the whole thing going. And so for some religious people, this is evidence of the God that created the universe. The causeless cause, the sacredness at the start of the universe that click play, set off the first cause, and then the laws of nature could get going. The problem with that argument is that, well, if God is the causeless cause and doesn't need anything to get it going, then why can't we say that about the universe itself? It defeats the argument with its own logic. It's like, well, if God doesn't need something to get him going, then why can't the universe not need anything to get going? It doesn't actually solve that mystery. So to me, the mystery is the only answer. I don't know. It would be a big claim to say, well, actually, yes, the universe did just start at the Big Bang and it's going to end in another 9 billion years. See you then. We don't know. And that's great. All right, we'll take a final question from Eric. So how do you best live a true life of flow, of wu-wei, the Taoist concept? So the journey we've been on is to understand that our consciousness is an aspect of the whole, that we come from the universe, we're part of a great interconnected web of life, and the plants and animals, they share our consciousness. Certainly intelligent, I would say conscious. I'll leave that up to you to decide. So then, really, why does this matter? And I really do believe these ideas matter. It's not just pure philosophy, which is, enjoyable as well. But practically, this helps us show up differently in our lives. We'll talk about the macro, and then we'll talk about the micro. So the collective, and then you and I, how to navigate our lives. There's a thread weaving all of this together, and the Taoists talk about the thread of the Tao. So going from this separate sense of self, okay, I'm just here on this planet for this one lifetime. The earth is just a resource for me to use. It doesn't matter anyway. I can just, rubbish things here. I can destroy the planet. It doesn't matter. When we understand that, okay, our very being here is connected to the very start of the universe, and evolution has happened over this planet for billions of years, and we're in this great interconnected web, then for me that creates an environmental consciousness, a sense of the sacred, the value of this planet that goes beyond what we can do with it, but its very being has value, something to be revered. I have a sense of reverence for you and for the plants and animals and for myself and for all of humanity and the whole planet. And if more of us had that sense of reverence through truly understanding that thread that connects all beings, the interbeing of life, then how would our collective systems, our politics, our economics change? I believe they would change fundamentally. Because even if we sorted out the climate crisis through maybe polluting the skies with aerosols to reflect light back out to stop the planet warming up, that itself will cause other problems. And we still live in economic systems that believe infinite economic growth on a finite planet is possible. And that has huge challenges. So to see our interconnection and to feel it and to live it and to love life and to love the planet, to have a sense of reverence for it, changes everything. And for our own lives can give us a sense of belonging and flow. So let's bring it into how we then show up in the world. That really disconnection for me is how I understand the source of most of our ills, personal and collective. So this understanding can help us soften those existential questions about our belonging in this universe. And with that need met for that kind of cosmic belonging, then we get out our own way. There's more trust in the mystery, the unknown, in ourselves and life, knowing the resilience of life, having survived so many billions of years. And then how does this help us flow? Is, well, okay, like we talked about the field of awareness. Cool. It's okay for me to have challenging thoughts and emotions and anxiety and depression and all of these painful experiences, because I am not my story. I'm not just my thoughts. I am the embodied awareness that experiences them all. And when I can connect with that, then I have spaciousness. And I can notice those experiences, but not let them take me over. I can choose my response. And then I can glide, I can flow with more ease. So that's why this waking up journey is so important for both the collective and our own experience of our own lives. Flow is possible, balance is possible. When we seek to know ourselves truly, to know thyself, we gain wisdom, and with that wisdom, balance and ease is possible. So I'm sending you so many good wishes for your journey of waking up, peace and balance. I'd love to stay connected. Let me know how your journey goes. There's a free PDF of the guides to keep going. And if you want to support me and the team, Balance is Possible. We have Taoist Wellness Online, now the biggest Tai Chi school in the world. I'd love to support you on your journey, easy practices. And then we hold retreats as well in the UK and then hopefully eventually abroad. And there will be links in the description for those as well. All right. So much love and see you soon.